All right, this week we're talking about silence. And this is such a relevant topic to our world today. One of my favorite stories in the Old Testament, you got a lot of you will know this, but there's this weird story where Elijah, God tells him to go off into this mountain and he's going to hear from God. And scripture says that, like a storm came, a whirlwind came, the wind came, and Elijah expected God to be in those big, massive things. And scripture says again and again, he wasn't in the storm, he wasn't in the wind. And then the final way that Elijah hears from God is through a whisper. Some translations say still, small voice. And that story is so good and so convicting for me, because what I always ask myself is like, how can I hear the whispers of God if my life is constantly surrounded with noise? And that's the world we live in. I know you're an Office fan. I know a lot of you guys are as well. I think of this scene where the character Ryan creates this new company, Wolf. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
And it's the whole concept. Wolf. That's right. The concept is that it connects all of your social media stuff and it will give you notifications all at once. And so I just remember the scene where it's just like dings and bings from all over places. And that's our lives, like our phones, Netflix, our emails, everything. We're just inundated with, there's external noise and then there's internal noise, and the external noise creates a lot of internal noise. And so I just want to read this one quote. I've been thinking a lot about how this takes away our focus, our attention. And Tim Wu, who's the author of The Attention Merchant, says this: how we spend the brutally limited resource of our attention will determine those lives to a degree most of us prefer not to think about. We must reflect that when we reach the end of our days, and here's the important part, our life experience will equal what we have paid attention to. So there's this concept of, as we're inundated with noise, distractions, all this stuff, we end up focusing on that instead of focusing on God and hearing His voice. And so, this practice is so vital for us. So, Keith, what's been your experience with, how do you practice silence, or how are you distracted in your life?
Definitely that little box that sits in my pocket all the time is probably my biggest distraction. Right. And so I think for me, when we had an office space that we were in, hopefully maybe one day you'll hear this and we will be back in office spaces, but I just go for a walk, to put down my phone, maybe leave my office, go for a walk, and to just kind of shut off a little bit of the noise. Right now I kind of practice this through just going on hikes and going out into nature, and to where I can just kind of turn off my phone, be away from laptop, be away from kind of a lot of other noises, the temptation of TV and other things, and just kind of be back in the sounds of creation. And in those spaces, just be reminded of God's presence again, and to just be with God in that. I think that's probably one of the biggest ways it kind of always kind of rings and really helps me out.
Nature is often associated with solitude and times of silence. And I think God has just sort of intertwined those things with our hearts. I couldn't agree more. Like years ago, I started taking these half-day solitudes. It was at a monastery, but it was by this beautiful lake. And I would just sit by the lake. And what's interesting, I don't know if you have this at all, but it takes a good hour, probably for me, of just like my brain is churning. I'm thinking about what am I not doing? What should I be doing right now? What did I not say? And then after about an hour for me, then slowly I start slowing down and I start listening to the waves, and I start hearing the wind, and then I can finally be still with God. And we probably can't do an hour every day, maybe, but I think that's just a testament for me of just how crazy our brains and distracted we are, and so how hard it is. So, something I would encourage everybody to do is even to think of what's a way you can do this every day. Sort of like you said, what are small ways? And then the next step would be, can you put something on your calendar we're trying to do this more as a staff on our church of like, can you put on a calendar a month in advance and say, I'm going to go away at least for a couple hours and just get away from the kids, get away from the work, get away from school and all that stuff. So encourage you to do that. Any other thoughts on silence and solitude?
Yeah, I just highly encourage it, especially if it's a little bit scary for you. Try those small steps, do that. But I mean, from the early days of the church to now, this has been one of the most vital practices for the life of the Christian, because it's that space where you're truly turning off everything and trying to listen to the voice of God and giving awareness to that and allowing that to be the only thing that's kind of reshaping you and reforming you. So even if it's a little scary, just jump out there and just give it a small try.